Welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar hosted by the Organization Development and Change program at Penn State. Today, we have the great pleasure of welcoming our presenters, Dr. Yoon, Sasha, and Cesar. My name is Layla Farzam, and I am the Alumni Ambassador for the Organization Development and Change program. We also have Jenny Lee with us today, who will be managing our chat feature. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, please open the chat feature in the Zoom link platform to interact and ask questions for the Q&A segment. If for some reason you get disconnected from our presentation, please use the same Zoom link to re-enter. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change can help you prepare to implement quality and continuous improvement initiatives in an organization. Furthermore, there's a PhD program in Workforce Education and Development with a concentration in Human Resource Development and Organization Development. Our program has created a continuous monthly webinar series from experts around the world. Today, we welcome Dr. Yoon, Sasha, and Cesar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hyung Yoon. I'm Assistant Professor of Workforce Education and Development at Penn State. And Sasha, Cesar.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Sasha Farley. I'm Human Capital and Organization Development Consultant at REI Systems.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cesar Padilla. I'm a grad student at Penn State in the Workforce Education Development Program. And I'm also a naval officer. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, the objectives of this session is for you to, at the end of the session, for you to understand the background and method of the study. And we use the Delphi method. And second, you will be able to describe 9 OD values identified from a future-oriented perspective. And lastly, I would like you to develop some ideas for application of those OD values that we identified through a Delphi study. So in order to fulfill the objectives, we will be sharing some background of this study and study design, again, which is Delphi, and the study results. So we came up with 9 different values, stay tuned, and application ideas of those OD values. But for this, we will not share our ideas with you. I would like you to share those ideas after reviewing or after learning about the results. So there will be some interactive session for about 10 minutes or so. So that's the activity. And we will share our ideas for next steps for research and practice.
Thank you, Joon. So before we dive into the details of the OD value study, we wanted to provide some context for what led to this research. This study came out of the OD Gathering, which was a group of about 100 practitioners and researchers from all over the world that got together once a year over 3 years in order to answer the question, what world do we want to create together, and what is the future of OD in that world? Out of these sessions, 4 working groups were created to address elements such as vision, definition, capabilities, and values. And this research came out of the Values Working Group. Now, this working group identified 6 perspectives that we used to guide the design of our study. And these perspectives include that OD values should guide how we practice OD, meaning that we wanted to incorporate an element that allowed these values to be applied in practice. We also wanted to make sure the values encompass both instrumental values, which is how we function, and terminal values, which is what we pursue. We also wanted to be sure that we were identifying professional values for the field, which are distinct from personal values. And we wanted to make sure that these values distinguished OD from other practices. We wanted to make sure that the labels that we identified were clear and easily understood by OD professionals, as well as the clients and people outside of the field. And this is especially important because historically, value labels that were used by organization development include humanism and democracy, which mean a lot internally to organization development practitioners, but are not as easily translatable outside of the field. And lastly, we wanted to identify values for the future. This means we wanted to take a future-oriented perspective on generating the values instead of looking backwards to what was previously published in the literature, or even looking at present day by looking at values in practice in OD practitioners' interventions or interactions with clients. Now, all of these perspectives led us to choose to conduct a 3-round Delphi study in order to gain consensus from a more diverse group of participants on the future-oriented values for organization development. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cesar, who will describe the participants of this study and the 3 main value elements we collected as a part of this study.
Thank you, Sasha. When we were recruiting participants, our aim was to be as inclusive as possible in our sampling and work with a diverse group of participants. In total, we worked with 42 participants throughout the study. You can see here how they break out per round. Most participants have been practicing OD between 10 and 19 years. In terms of gender, our group of participants were fairly balanced between male and female, and we did have some participation with individuals identifying as non-binary. We can also see that in terms of age, practitioners were most represented in the 50-plus age range. We were able to achieve participation with younger age groups down to the 20 to 29 age group. In terms of ethnicity, we endeavored to include a variety of those living in and outside of the United States. We had we done otherwise, our pool of participants would have been overwhelmingly Caucasian, and we wanted to emphasize diversity here. In the next slide, we'll see where they work. Next slide. Here, there are 58 countries represented, and these are the places where our participants work. You can see here that there is a strong presence in the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and South Africa, followed by Canada, Mexico, India, Hungary, and Spain. So we can see here that, OD impacts, there's a worldwide impact here. The data tables included in our paper provide more details, and we can provide that information to you on request. Next slide. So the basis of our study includes 3 elements. The value label is a symbolic representation of related elements summarized in one expression. It is the name given to the description, so it is the name of the value. The second is the value description, and that is an explanation of the value label of what it entails. It's necessary for conceptualizing the value label in the OD setting, so in short, it defines the value label. The third are behavioral indicators, and these are descriptions on how an OD practitioner may exhibit a value in practice. So in other words, an OD practitioner who exhibits these indicators in practice demonstrates holding a particular value. Next slide, please.
Okay, in order to identify those value labels and behavior indicators initially, we went through 3 rounds. So in the first round, we gathered initial ideas for those values. So we asked participants to provide us with the suggested value labels, but we also wanted them to provide behavior indicators. And second round, after summarizing all those, we tried to refine those values and came up with a set of values, and wanted to ask those participants to rate the validity of those values and behavior indicators. And in the third round, there was another round of voting process to gain consensus. From that, we refined those value labels, behavior indicators, and so on. The threshold that we used was 75% or higher in order to indicate the level of agreement. So Delphi goes through an iterative process of asking the rate of agreement on those opinions, ideas, and the results that are summarized from the previous round. And for minor edits, like behavior indicators, here and there we had to make some minor edits based on people's opinions and suggestions. So those, for those acceptance or deletion of minor edits, we use 51% majority rule. For detailed information regarding each of the rounds, Sasha will share those process.
Thank you, Joon. So for round one, as we mentioned, our goal was to gather values initially. And this is because we wanted to start from a future-oriented perspective. So we wanted to start from a blank slate. To achieve this, we asked participants to provide 3 to 5 values, the descriptions, and the behavioral indicators that they believed can help guide the field of OD in the future. In analyzing the initial list that we received, we could not create a manageable number of categories when we looked at it from the value level. However, during this initial analysis, we identified significant overlap in associated behavioral indicators. So we did a second round of analysis coding at the behavioral indicator level, which allowed us to identify a list of categories that we grouped into 10 value themes with descriptions and representative behavioral indicators, all pulled from participant responses. Next slide, please. Now in round two, we aimed to refine the values. Now, as Joon mentioned, part of the Delphi study is about gaining consensus. One of the ways that this is done is by sharing all of the participants' responses and analyses with a larger group in each round. This sharing of information and perspectives allows the participants to learn from each other and evolve their thinking based on the feedback of others. Essentially, this allows for the recreation of some of the dialogue that would happen in a face-to-face interaction through a remote survey tool. So in order to achieve this, for round two, we shared the summary of the round one analyses and results. And this included sharing the participants' initial responses, including the coding that was used to create the 10 value themes. Now this coding allowed them to see the traceability of how their initial inputs fed into those 10 elements. Now what we asked the participants to do in round two was to rate the validity of each value theme as a whole, as well as the individual behavioral indicators that were a part of that theme. We also asked them to suggest potential value labels for the themes. We did not provide value labels at this step because since we had themed them, we wanted to make sure that the participants were the ones that were able to suggest the labels to be associated with those themes. And then lastly, we asked them to provide any additional feedback or edits at any of the elements that we presented. After receiving the round two responses, we completed a quantitative and qualitative analysis and made necessary changes based on the participant feedback and validity scores. The major changes we made was the removal of one value theme and the refocusing of a few others. In addition, we made a number of refinements to behavioral indicators based on all of this information. Now, given the shift in focus of some of these values, after we had asked the participants to provide value labels, we wanted to call on a larger group, which we're called the advisory group, which was largely made out of working group members and experts in the OD field, in order to help us make the decisions on how to take the suggested value labels and identify 3 to 5 potential labels that we could present to the participants in round 5 to select the end label. We wanted to make sure we did this so that we were incorporating a larger perspective given the refocusing of the values, but we did rely completely on the language that was provided by the participants. Next slide, please. So in round 3, this is where we aim to gain the consensus, right? So we did a lot of analysis in round 2, and as I mentioned, we reported all of that back to the participants. Now, the information that we ended up providing to the participants included a list of the suggested value labels with the updated value descriptions, the original and edited versions of the behavioral indicators, and also the validity rankings for the overall values and each behavioral indicator, along with the qualitative comments for all elements from all the participants from round 2. After reviewing this, we asked the participants to rank order the suggested value labels, accept or reject any edits or deletions, and rate the validity of overall values and individual behavioral indicators, and again, to provide additional feedback and edits. After receiving the responses from round 3, we conducted another quantitative and qualitative analysis to make minor edits to improve clarity of the values in the final list. Now, this analysis ended up with 9 different value themes. And I want to be clear, we are not about to present all 9 value themes with the descriptions and the number of associated behavioral indicators, because that is a lot of information to read on a PowerPoint. As Joon mentioned, we will be providing that to you later on in the session. However, for this part, we are going to be presenting you with the 9 value labels to give you a sense of what we did. And then we're also going to present an example that shows all 3 of those elements for you to understand the depth of the information that we collected. Next slide, please. Now this visual, I want to be clear that this visual did not come out of the research. This visual came out of us presenting these results to the OD gathering and getting additional feedback from the participants to refine a little bit, and also to get some operational concepts of how we can present these values to enable more easily application of these values in practice, and also to show the relationships between the values. So as you see from the picture, there are two circles, an inner circle and an outer circle. The inner circle depicts the values that largely apply inwardly to practitioners and leaders or others that are applying OD in their work. These values include awareness of self and system, integrity, continuous learning and innovation, and courageous leadership. Now on the outer circle, you see values that largely apply outwardly to interactions with others. These values include collaborative engagement, trust and respect, client growth and development, strategic practicality, and diversity. Now, it's really important to note that all values can be applied both inwardly and outwardly, and that it's all of these 9 values taken together that define organization development. This means that OD practitioners should be applying all of these values in their work all the time. And this also means that anyone that wants to practice organization development, whether they're practitioners or want to incorporate it into their work at large, should be thinking of all 9 of these values and the behavioral indicators associated with it as they are thinking about how they are working with clients in their work. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Joon, who will review awareness of self and system to show you the full example of what we gathered for each of these 9 values.
All right, thank you, Sasha. This is just one example, and if you want to take a look at the full examples or full results, please wait until the end of the session. There will be a link given to you. For this particular one, this is awareness of both self and system. It's not just awareness of self or just as awareness of system. It's both self and system. And yeah, you can read the value description, which is to be conscious of all levels of a system, meaning at the individual level, team level, group or organization level, or societal level. It involves recognizing the self and the client from a systems perspective. So systems perspective is a kind of keyword here also, while treating each human system as a whole. So it talks about connectedness between self and system, and within the system, which is all elements within the system. So these are behavior indicators for this label. So you can read about these. Some of these are related to self-awareness. Some are related to systems awareness. Some are related to the interconnectedness. And those figures in parentheses indicate the level of validity or rate of agreement. So 82% indicates that 82% of the participants agreed to accept this as one of the indicators, right? So the E means that we made a little bit of a tweak after the study based on the feedback, right? So most of them do not have E's, which means that these are right out of the study. And these expressions are not our words, these are from the participants. All right, so if you are curious about other values and behavior indicators, please take a look at our results to be shared. All right, so this is a comparison slide. On the left, you will see the results of the study. So awareness of self and system, continuous learning and innovation, integrity, courageous leadership, trust, respect, diversity, collaborative engagement, strategic practicality, client growth and development. At the beginning of the study, before we collect data, we compiled all of the resources regarding OD values, and we analyzed those and we identified those value labels. But we didn't want to use the study results for this study, like those resources, references for this study. We wanted to compare our study results with existing literature later on. And at the OD gathering, when we shared the results with those participants, about 100 people, they mentioned, oh, strategic practicality seems to be a bit new. And what else? There was one more, yeah, courageous leadership seems to be new. But we found out that the existing literature already mentioned those elements. So we found all of the evidence that tells that the list of values that we identified from a future-oriented perspective are relevant to those values that have been shared before. But those probably have not been articulated enough or shared enough largely with among those OD practitioners and researchers. So maybe one implication of this research is that this research expands the representative to OD values, like as Sasha mentioned, humanism and democracy, into those 9 values that can be relevant to the past and the present, hopefully the future. All right, so if you are curious about those previous values-related studies and literature, please take a look at the article that will come out this year or next year, which is conditionally accepted by Journal of Applied Behavioral Science. So this is about the application of OD values. So one of the purposes of this study was to distinguish OD from other fields or other practices. So for example, following those OD values can be a differentiator between OD and, let's say, change management. In order for you to call that or tell that you are practicing OD, and you will need to follow those 9 OD values. But if you practice, let's say, change management, you don't have to follow all those. You may focus on some of those values. And OD values, like in OD gathering, there was a popular expression among the participants, which is OD has loose fences with many doors, because there are many different practitioners with different backgrounds and also with different domain of practice. For example, coaching, leadership development, team building, organizational design, change management, and so on. So OD values can be applied to each of the domains of practice. And those can be applied to the individuals, groups, organizations in the society. And one purpose was to differentiate OD from other practices. So for example, not all change management people would follow OD practice or OD values. So how you can tell someone is following OD practice, although they do not frame their practice as OD, is to see whether they exhibit those OD values in their practice. For example, some management consultants may follow systems thinking without exhibiting high level of self-awareness. They could follow steps, already set processes. Right? And if you're a leader, you can be a democratic leader, which is aligned with OD principle. You can be a top-down style leader with theory X mindset. So here, think about your role at work. You might be a researcher, and you might be a practitioner, or you might be an educator. And think about how you could apply those 9 values that you see, the awareness of self-thinking system, integrity, continuous learning and innovation, courageous leadership, and so on, those 9 as a whole to your practice. How can you take advantage of this? How can you apply these 9 values and behavior indicators? Let me pause here because of the time. Maybe there might be some questions before we get into the activity. So yeah, there is one question. This moment. What was let me just read. What was the most surprising value or behavior indicators that came out of this study? All right, so I think I already mentioned those. It was, yeah, here, yeah, courageous leadership. So I noticed that the OD people, it's not like OD people value confrontation when it's needed. They are not afraid of speaking up, even faced with the authority. So that was yeah, courageous leadership. And strategic practicality was the second one. It is to have strategic mindset, but being flexible. So this seems to be aligned with the buzzword like agility or agile leadership, or agile organization, etc.
Hi, so I'm going to answer another question that was posed. The question is, in a matrix organization, is it critical to have the outer values be set from top down in order for them to truly take form and be impactful as a part of the organizational culture? I think that's a tricky question, but when you do this from an organization development perspective, one thing that runs through all of the values that you'll see when you see the behavioral indicators is the idea that all ideas are best when you incorporate them from all people within the organization. So that means whenever you are setting elements, including values, you should get a group of everyone in the organization together. And by that, I mean not just the top of the organization of the executives, but people through all levels of the organization in all roles within an organization, including matrix, right? People running in matrix is a little bit trickier in some ways and easier in other ways because people hold multiple roles. So you can get a lot of perspectives with potentially less people, but it's still important to make sure that it is not just driven from top down, that values creation is done through a representative approach with everybody in there. And that's seen through the collaborative engagement elements and the diversity values in organization development, in addition to the trust and respect and integrity elements. So when you're creating values for an organization from an OD perspective, that should be driven from the people. That should be driven by the people who are going to be exemplifying the values, and they need to be identified and bought in by the people at the organization, throughout the organization, not just the people at the top, for them to be effective and impactful within the organization. I also saw another question that was actually in the comment stream about the total sample size for 43 individuals. Yes, we had 60 people that were selected to participate in the study. Throughout the study, our first round had 38 participants, I believe, and then as normal, it kind of drops down. We still invited all 60 participants to each round of the study, providing the information to try to ensure that we did not end up with, we ended up with a significant amount of people contributing to the consensus. So the 43 number indicates the total number of individual unique participants that participated in at least one round of the study. The other information that we presented in terms of the specific numbers for each round were the total participants for that round, but we didn't have consistent participation across rounds. So the 43 number is the unique number.
I'm going to ask this, answer this question. So from Larry, are you saying that these values are relevant to both current and future OD practitioners? I would say yes. The reason that we framed it as a OD values from future-oriented perspective is to make it relevant to the current and future, to move away from the fixed mindset, not in a sense fixed versus growth, but people seems to be a bit inflexible regarding OD values. Like they insist on having some of them having like democracy and humanism as OD values. We wanted to move away from those fixed structure. So we wanted to see the values from future-oriented perspective, hoping to find somewhat new values or some missed, the values that we have missed so far. So and we ended up finding evidence that those values that we discovered through this process are also relevant to those values that have been mentioned have been mentioned in the past. So I would say the results are relevant to the present and the future. It could be also the past. Any other questions?
So, yeah, there is a question asking, aren't these the same values we as OD practitioners want to develop, such strengthen in client organizations? I think this question has a couple of levels that I want to explain. So another integral part of organization development is the idea that we want to go into systems and leave them better than when they started, in terms of positioning them to do the work that we do on their own without us being there to, quote unquote, hold their hands or guide them through it. It's about teaching those skills and ideas and perspectives within the organization. So if you take that perspective, theoretically, some people could apply these values in that way of trying to have these values be exemplified by the system. That's not necessarily how we develop these values, though. We were developing these values for practitioners of the field to use to guide their own practices, not to put them onto a client organization or to suggest or push for them to be incorporated. I think it's still important as OD professionals to recognize and meet the systems where they're at, and to exemplify these values and how we work and how we approach the practices and interventions that we do, in order to ensure that we are using the skills and knowledge of organization development in these interactions. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. And I'm going to answer this. As labeled, almost every value is instrumental, or maybe not. So using Rockage's framework, there are instrumental values and terminal values, right? And instrumental values are about the ways, something that you can use in the process, right? So I would say, yeah, most of them could be perceived as instrumental values, but there are some terminal values, or both are terminal instruments. For example, diversity can be a purpose of a value, OD value. So it can be end results, although we can ensure diversity in our process. And client growth and development. We should keep client growth and development in mind. At the same time, this can be the end result of the OD practice. So in that sense, this can be a terminal value, more of a terminal value. But integrity, maybe instrumental value. Collaborative engagement, maybe an instrumental value. But we want to lead the organization to embrace the practice of exhibiting collaborative engagement in their leadership or leadership behavior. So if that's the case, collaborative engagement can be a terminal value. So it's a mix between instrumental and terminal values. But I would agree that this is more on the instrumental value side.
I'm going to answer a question about the participant distribution across the countries. So one thing that we didn't mention in terms of how we recruited, part of how we got participants was by distributing the invite to participate in the recruitment survey through professional organizations, international ones and domestic ones, to ensure that we were getting a broad range of inputs and influences. We then took the responses from the recruitment study and selected to get the max mix we could across maximum variation across all of the elements. So while there may be less distribution and less representation in Asia or Latin America, we did select as many as we could. Obviously, no matter what you do, there's always tends to be a leaning, unfortunately, that I think is something that all of us should be striving to figure out ways to prevent this, but there always seems to be a leaning towards the US and Europe, right? We did try actively to try to recruit by pushing, and also we allowed for a snowball recruiting methods. We allowed others to share it with their groups and their groups, and we did get a pretty good representative group. But yes, there is still, unfortunately, the skew towards a largely US or European representation. But we did have participants who practiced and lived in Latin American countries and in Asian countries.
Right. And there are not many associations in Asia and South America or Africa and so on. So there's a need for OD to be, I don't know, OD forming organizations, associations should be facilitated. So yeah, there's an Asia OD network, and there probably would be one more, but there should be a bit more like a country-specific OD organizations, which we need to see. Okay.
Do we want to transition to the activity, and then we can circle back to additional questions later? I think we can inform. Some of these questions are starting to get at what I think the activity can help inform.
Okay, so for this activity, please type or please click on the link that will be shared in chat. Let me see, this one. So I just shared the link with you. So please click on the link, and you will be directed to a system called Meeting Sphere. All right. Yeah, please go in. I will check how many people have arrived so far. I have 4 participants, and please wait until a question will come up, and you will receive. You will be asked the 4 questions, which would be about your own application ideas for educators. So if you are an educator, you may have some concrete ideas about how you could apply the results to your practice as an educator or a researcher. That's the first question. The second question is about as an OD practitioner, in what ways can you apply and use those 9 values and behavior indicators? And the third question is about you as a leader, right? So think about, if you're a leader, if you have an idea, link, no link. So here, okay, so yeah, Jihae, I just shared. So that's a third question is about you as a leader. So think about how you could apply this to your practice as a leader. And the last one is other application ideas. So stay tuned. I see 35 now, 36. So that's increasing. So I will see how many people have joined and wait until I see maybe at least 60. So yeah, please click on the link, and a question will pop up on your screen, and please type up an idea. If you don't have any idea, you don't have to type up, but at the same time, you will be able to see what other people think about the application ideas. I will wait a bit. About 48 people showed up. Yeah, it will appear blank for now, but once enough people have joined, you will see a question. Okay, so I think I can share it now. Yeah, people are joining. Okay, so this is the first question. As an educator or a researcher, in what ways can you apply and use those 9 values and behavioral indicators? So you can type up, and you will be able to see what others have shared. So if you are not in the group Meeting Sphere system, you can go in, or if you want to just observe, you can take a look at my screen. Yeah, waiting for your ideas. Asking questions of myself, peers, client, and focus on the range. Okay. So this is about you as an educator or a researcher. Met with organized culture, consistently model the behaviors. Yeah, if you're an educator teaching OD courses, you probably should model those behaviors. Okay, that's good. There's a reference point for aspiring practitioners. Leverage them. Okay. Yeah, Sasha and Cesar, if you want to speak about those answers, some of those answers that are shared, please do so. Great. Yeah, yeah. This is although you are not answering this question, like yeah, here one of you called the sample size of 43. Delphi study from the perspective of Delphi study, I think we have 42 participants. 42 participants seems to be a bit relatively large. So qualitative study works a bit differently from quantitative study. And we look for saturation, although Delphi study do not look for saturation, but because we try to gather ideas from practitioners in different countries who also have OD background, we feel somewhat confident about the results. And also these the results were shared with OD gathering participants who that were about 100 people who are heavily committed to OD, and we got their support as well. So yeah.
Joon, so people are responding. I think your screen might be frozen, so let me run through. Oh, there they go. Right. So I think some of the comments that people are responding for ideas are, a lot of them seem to be around modeling or using these indicators to check your practice and to verify that you are exhibiting the behavioral indicators. That's a lot of what we were thinking about too. Some people are also saying it's a good starting point for discussions, and I think that is also accurate and embedded in every class that we teach. So another thing that we were thinking about, and then I agree, is these can be created as an integral part of an introductory course, or even as a course in itself within OD and other related fields, to have the conversation about what it means to exemplify the values of organization development in your work, and especially like pulling on the behavioral indicators as examples of that work and what it actually looks like in practice, right? Because sometimes we know as we teach, it can be making that jump from the theory and the ideas and the words to what that actually looks like in practice can be a little bit tricky, which is why we really thought it was important to identify those behavioral indicators to kind of take that uncertainty away and provide concrete resources for people to reference as they're learning as new practitioners and so forth.
Yeah. I see number 31 discuss these and all the global competencies together. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it could be discussed along with all the competencies and definitions and so on, those fundamental aspects.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on one of some of these. So I noticed that somebody indicated that as an HR practitioner, they will use it to guide thinking around OD and also implementing within the organizational culture. So, having been in HR myself and having, sometimes we're a bit challenged in how we can engender trust and empower people in the workplace. And certainly holding these values will help guide a lot of that in ensuring that, employees do feel empowered and are empowered, but as well as for the HR to gain some confidence and knowing that you can cultivate trust within the workforce.
Right, great, thank you. And we are moving on. So the next question will pop up, and this is about, as an OD practitioner, how you can use the set of values. Cool. Yeah, contracting conversations. Yeah, this can be, in my opinion, this can be helpful to help the client organization or decision makers to understand the OD approach. All right. Now, also keep in mind that in order for you to tell that your practice is OD, you have to exhibit all of those, not just one or two of those.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot about self-assessment, adjusting how you practice to exemplify more of these values in your work. I think that's a really good thought, and that is living the values, right? Because one of the values is continuous learning and self-awareness. So in doing that, you're getting closer to the values of OD, right? While also living the values by even recognizing. So I think those are great.
Yeah. To me personally, the most beneficial value is courageous leadership. So I have, while going through this study, I realized that I try to train myself not to be afraid of speaking up with the authority figures as well. So this was one of the advantages for me personally.
Yeah, and definitely like one of the interesting parts of conducting this research, right, is learning as we go through, because it's a great way to learn different ideas and then check our, I know we had conversations about within our own group of how are we applying these values and like in what ways can we strengthen our approach in the ways that we interact with things based on what we're hearing from this research. A lot of it was like, oh, I do this, but some of it's like, oh, maybe I should do this, or I didn't think about applying it in this way, but this is coming up a lot from all of these practitioners, and it's just a way to continuously improve what we are doing. And also, I know it's helped me communicate more clearly the distinction between organization development and some of the other related practices in terms of that it's this collective idea and not just any two or three. Because as Joon mentioned, there's a lot of other related practices that might have 3 or 4 of these, but they might not include collaborative engagement as their approach, or they might not champion the courageous leadership of speaking truth to power, which is part of that. And that sort of distinction is really helpful in describing this and in explaining the differences.
Okay. We are moving up. So this is about the application ideas as a leader or for leaders. So how could the results be useful for leaders or leadership? Right.
One of the common themes is modeling them across, right? That's the best way to share values, is to exemplify what they look like and model them for others to see them in practice.
So yeah, if leaders exhibit those values, that may mean that they are capable of making organizational change in a collaborative manner. So yeah, those values can be emphasized in leadership curriculum as well when they talk about organization change or managing change.
And I see like applying them to assess corporate culture and supporting decision-making and visioning exercises. I think those are all really good uses, especially kind of circling back to one of the previous questions about how do you identify values, right? You identify values by exemplifying these values in the process that you design and create to identify your own specific cultural and company values.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you for your participation. The last question. So this is about other application ideas that you have not expressed yet. Oh, wow, okay, with teenagers.
This is when I wish we could have like a back and forth.
Yeah, I want to ask, yeah, and but whomever mentioned teenagers, would you elaborate your idea in chat? In writing, I'm also intrigued. How can this be applied to writing? I'm curious. The OD values to normative corporate popular social values. Quality assurance. Any setting, any group. Because if you value humanism and democracy, I think yeah, this could be applied like even like BLM movement.
You know, some of these comments remind me of like when you work with others that come into an organization to work with you on a project, and all this jargon is being tossed around, right? And so the level of transparency tends to go down. So I just wanted to comment on that one on writing. I think, you know, when we employ jargon as a way of building barriers, being transparent and keeping things simple is a good way to communicate information. And I think that also speaks to quality and wow, quite a few of these actually.
Yeah, I like also the idea of like number 13. This can be used to evaluate internal OD consultants. So if you're an OD department, like head of OD department, then you could rate the degree of their relevancy or yeah, to their OD values.
We got a response in the comments for the teenager one.
Yes.
And it says like, use it with teenagers that can be resistant to direction, and basically think of the family unit as an organization and applying these internally. And I think that gets at a really important point that you'll see a lot if you know any OD practitioners is we don't apply this stuff only in organizations. We apply them in our personal interactions and at societal levels. Organization development practitioners frequently have a drive to participate in global interactions, which you saw in some of the alternative applications, right? Societal norms and really addressing some societal issues that we are seeing. So it definitely works. You can apply this anywhere, whether it's in an organization, whether it's in your personal life, and whether it's at trying to make changes at a national level. Organization development practitioners have been integral in actually in the creation of governments in different places around the world. And so this can really be applied literally at any level of the system, not just organization, all the way up to the national and global scale.
There is a question, will the results of the group questions be shared after the webinar? Probably there is a way to share it. We'll see how to make it happen. So if that's possible, I will definitely share it.
Yeah, and if you want any information that we presented, in addition, we're going to share with you the full results in a second. But if you want that, the responses to the questions, just email the email that was sent earlier in the chat. We'll repost it near the end, and you can request it, and we will make sure to send them to you.
Yeah, and yeah, these are some ideas about the next steps, our own ideas. There will be more based on your input, but these are initial ideas that we had. As for research, we wanted to validate the results using quantitative method. So one of you mentioned the sample size. So for this, probably we will need to gather data from maybe almost up to 1,000 OD practitioners. We'll see. Identification of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and resources associated with the values in order to turn these values into a curriculum. And also, one of you mentioned that this could be used for an evaluation purpose. So yeah, this can be an easy assessment tool for the development needs of OD practitioners. And we can also do comparative studies between OD and other practices such as OD and change management. And there has been some studies to compare between those two practices. And they are somewhat different in terms of their values. But we will be able to see the distinct differences between those two or several practices. And development and validation of an OD values instrument. So this can be done. And as for teaching and practice, I think most of the ideas have been shared here. Yeah, we wanted to have a Q&A session at the end, but we we ended up having Q&As during the session. And because of time, probably we cannot address all those questions that are displayed right now on our screen. But you can type bit.ly/OD values results. Then you will be able to see the screen. No, the document. Here, let me briefly share how it looks like. All right, so once you go there, you will be able to download this. Yeah, we noticed that the number of countries is 58, but I didn't make the change here. This is my mistake, but I will update it shortly within maybe 5 minutes or so. So do not download it. You can download it, but please download it again. This is a typo that I found. So you will see the whole full set of the values along with the value labels, descriptions, and behavior indicators with the validity scores and so on. So there you have it. Yeah, these are our contact information. Here, yeah, I think Leila or Jenny will talk about or introduce an upcoming event.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to thank Dr. Yoon, Sasha, and Cesar for sharing their knowledge, expertise, and wisdom with us today. If we did not get to your question, please feel free to send us an email, which you can find on your screen. On behalf of the OD&C program, we hope that you found this webinar helpful. Registrations for all other events can be found on our social media platforms. And please feel free to visit our website, which is on the screen, or email us with any questions. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to have you back on August 28th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Please feel free to share webinar series with your networks and social media platforms, as all are welcome and invited. Thanks.
Also, I want to add one more quick thing before we leave. There was one question that meant to mention and didn't. Yes, so this values work is not meant to be 100% final. It is kind of considering 90–95% done. As part of the OD gathering, there will be publication and distribution of this work. And the idea is to get further feedback from the field at large to be able to refine some of this stuff as we seek to get global consensus from the full community, not just the people who initially participated. So just want to let you guys know, keep an eye out for something from the OD gathering. And that's it, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.